Welcome to the Dirty Side of Leadership podcast with Ron and Kristin, where leadership meets entertainment. This podcast features stories with names and certain aspects that have been changed to keep submissions private. Enjoy the show.
Welcome to the Dirty Side of Leadership podcast, where leadership meets entertainment. As always, I'm Kristin, joined by my amazing co-host, Ron Ward, and best-selling author. I know you don't like when I say that, but your book is amazing, and people need to understand that that is our namesake. Ron, how are you doing?
I am doing, wow. Gosh, I didn't even have to write that.
I know.
I'm proud of you, Kristin. Are you okay?
Thank you. I'm
you
doing all right. It's a new year, you know?
You must have set a goal to be, I set a goal to be humble, and you set one to be compassionate,
a little
apparently.
More compassionate. Yeah.
That's great.
Hey.
I love it.
As I age, I become a little more compassionate.
Hey, everyone, we do want to wish everyone a happy new year, and we hope that your year is filled with peace and joy and happiness and everything that is good.
Yeah. You know, I have to tell you, so I'm going to share what my family did on New Year's Eve. I know you have been under the weather, so yours might not be that exciting, poor guy. But there was this trend. I don't know if you saw it, Ron, and it's basically where you use painter's tape and you make a square somewhere on the floor, and two people march blindfolded next to each other. And the objective is to stay in the square, and you play music and they march, and they feel like they're in that square, smack in the middle of it, and they're walking all over the place. So it's funny. My family did that last night, and my son and I were pretty good. We stayed right around that square. But my daughter and my husband, oh my gosh, they have some spatial issues because they were just going all over the place. And that was hysterical. I have to say, I don't know if it's my age or what, Ron, but that was one of the best New Year's Eves I've ever had.
Gosh, I did it as well. I was by myself, but I'm pretty sure I stayed in the square.
No, you didn't.
No, I think that's very cool. That's a great family activity.
Yeah, you got to do it with your grandson when you're feeling better.
Yeah, I have to do that.
Yeah, it's a good one. But so that was good stuff. But you know, a lot happened New Year's Eve and New Year's Day, and we're here to break down the New Orleans, excuse me. Can you tell I'm from the West Coast?
Yeah.
The Bourbon Street attack. And man, this is just happening all too often. What is going on, Ron?
Yeah, this is heartbreaking. It really is. And our prayers go out to the victims, the families, first responders, everyone who suffered from this attack. It's unthinkable when you're sitting here, but it's not unthinkable in the world that we live. Mm-hmm. And so having said that, tragedy raises questions about leadership, accountability, and public safety. And we're all about leadership, and we're trying to sometimes we look at modern events, even when they're horrific like this, to break down leadership issues.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll jump into it, but I think it's important that everyone listening understands that this is a developing story. This happened literally, we're recording on New Year's Day. So this happened early New Year's Day, like 1, 2 in the morning, right? And basically what happened was a truck driven by an ISIS sympathizer killed 10 people and injured 35 others in this horrifying attack. And, you know, the tragic irony was that protective barriers that were meant to prevent such an attack were removed just 2 months prior for an overhaul. And really, this sparked the interest in us diving in further because we want to explore how leadership decisions and a bad one at that played a role in this disaster.
Yeah, that's a great place to start. The leadership decision to remove protective barriers in November, knowing that you would be having from Christmas all the way through to the new year, that there would be large groups of people. It's really mind-boggling. And as anyone knows, these the bollards, they call them, were crucial for securing Bourbon Street. But city officials deemed the old system ineffective. They got frustrated with it, and they take it down to do a 3-month overhaul. Yeah. Some things don't age well, Kristin.
No, they don't. And 3 months, it's like the most active 3 months. Well, not the most. I know we all have, New Orleans has a lot going on. But, you know, it's like the holiday season. Come on. It doesn't make any sense. So Bob Sims, who's the head of the French Quarter Management District, he said, and I quote, "The track was always full of crap, beads, and doubloons." I don't know what that means. Is that stuff they throw out?
I think so.
So he's saying eventually everybody realized there was a need to replace them, but was this timeline realistic? That's what they should have been asking themselves, especially with a major public event like New Year's Eve on the horizon.
I'll say this too, Kristin, that's an excuse, not an answer.
Right.
And when leaders have to start making excuses, that's when things get even more murky.
Right.
So was the question we need to ask, was there a contingency plan? I think that's been answered.
Yeah.
Were there temporary barriers? Anything to bridge the gap between the removal of the old system and the installation of the new? The failure to implement temporary safety measures shows a lack of foresight.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm just really taken aback by this, Kristin.
Yeah, no, I think the majority of the nation is. I was reading an article this morning from the New York Post, and of course, they generally will dive into topics that others, mainstream media news will not, but they're the ones who really were shedding light on this horrible leadership decision. And, when we think about it, leadership isn't just about identifying problems, it's about anticipating risks and addressing them proactively. We've talked about this before. And this might require intermediate planning.
It does. So what you're saying, I think, is the vision takes time. And it's that point between your starting point and the vision that you have to have some kind of an alternate plan or an interim plan. This is, again, as I began to read this, and Kristin picked this topic. We had another topic, by the way, and this was so fresh. But as I read this, it just really bothered me that there was not an interim plan. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute.
Yeah, I want to shift to the response of law enforcement. So when the attacker drove his truck into the crowd, police did act swiftly, and they engaged him in a firefight. Ultimately, they neutralized the threat. That's terminology for he is now deceased. And that's one thing we can talk about. It looks like law enforcement leadership did do a good job, at least in the response, maybe not necessarily in the preventative actions. I don't know how much they were even involved in the decisions when it comes to removing those barriers. Did you see anything on that?
No, but I think that's a mayoral type. A mayor and a chief of police usually collaborate. But I want to take a quick side note because I think a lot of people may not understand this neutralizing the threat. Mm-hmm. That term is used because it used to be an old saying with police, shoot to kill. And they started realizing the psychological impact of that. So we never shoot to kill. You shoot to neutralize that threat. So that may look totally different. It may not involve death. And it gives law enforcement a more sincere way to look at stopping a threat versus shooting to kill. We're not killers. We're protectors. So it's a psychological mind shift. And I thought someone in our audience might find that interesting.
It is. And I'm so glad you said that because I almost asked you to elaborate a little bit on that because that is not a term that people that haven't served in some form of either law enforcement, military are familiar with. Yeah.
And in the academy, we called it stop the threat, but we would always, just a little terminology there, semantics, but that's what it's all about.
Right.
So the bravery cannot be overstated. No matter what happened before, the officers, 2 officers were injured in the confrontation.
I saw that.
But their quick action likely prevented even more loss of life because you think about it, a vehicle going into a crowd of people could kill 100. It's horrendous.
Yeah. I feel horrible. We think about the victims and then there's everyone that witnessed this. And that is going to linger over the city for a long time and in the minds of the folks that witnessed that. And it's really hard to feel safe again.
You know something, Kristin, also this dichotomy. Imagine you're in celebration mindset.
Yeah.
And seconds later, you're in a completely horrific scene and your mindset would completely like it's that part in and of itself is crazy to think about.
It really is. It really is. Talk about that. It's like a mental whiplash. And go ahead.
Well, I was just going to go ahead and get into what we started discussing. Could a more secure environment have reduced the burden on law enforcement in the early morning hours, as you said, as we're recording this? Driving through a crowd of people is not new. As a matter of fact, we know it's happened in America, but literally on December 24th, a car plowed into a busy outdoor Christmas market in eastern Germany, and it killed at least 2 people and injured 60 others in what authorities called a deliberate attack. I know that's in Germany, but it's the world we live in, and that should have sent up red flags across the world, frankly.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important that we talk about lessons for leaders here, because, what lessons can leaders take from this tragedy or these tragedies? And I think first, public safety has to be a top priority. And not all of us are in public safety, but we can learn a lot from it. Well, when you're making decisions, right? So infrastructure improvements are important, but they shouldn't come at the cost of safety. And so many people do this in any industry. They want to be better and be more sleek and make changes. And here we are at the new year. We're going to see a lot of this, but you have to make sure that the timing is right, that you have a plan to bridge while you're making the changes. And yes, this one has it comes at the largest risk, which is safety, right? And human life. But even in industries that don't have that element, you have to really think about what carnage could possibly come from that if you aren't foreshadowing.
Yeah, and I'm sure a lot of people are thinking as we're talking right now, what could have been done differently? And we're talking about a contingency plan.
Yeah.
And Kristin, this comes from me because you and I discussed it off air. But number one, it doesn't appear there was a contingency plan at all. But in my mind, if you're going to have a crowd of people and it's a celebration, you have very significant signage that says no vehicles beyond this point. Right. And you could even put police spike strips that would have slowed that vehicle down, even if they busted through the signage. And it would have probably lessened the loss of life. Now, there could be something that I don't know about the way the streets intersect or something like that, but you would think, because where the populated areas are, and that's what was targeted, that you could do something like that. But definitely, whether in business life or anything else, you've got to have that contingency planning between the time that a vision, until a vision becomes reality. You've got to still survive. You've got to still function.
Exactly. So I think what they were focused on is preparing for Mardi Gras. And so that was the goal. So in November, when they're like, all right, we have a 90-day period where we want to revamp this, and they're saying those barriers were full of Mardi Gras beads and all sorts of stuff. They were thinking Mardi Gras. They weren't thinking New Year's Eve, clearly. I mean, that's pure speculation, but it makes sense to me. What do you think on that?
No, I think that's brilliant. I think that's the case. You're looking at your biggest event and you forgot the stopgap, the smaller things.
And we've all done that. That. We have some big thing. For me, it used to be preparing preparing reports for the board. And so all these other little things are there, but then you have this huge task, right? That is in front. And so you can forget about little things or make little mistakes.
Yeah. And Kristin, there's a lesson here as far as I remember, just like you're talking about, if I was working on something major, you forget your pleasantries, you forget that you expect them to know that you've got something big going. And unless you verbalize that, they don't know that. And you got to be careful during those times when you're hyper-focused on a major project.
Yes. I'm so glad you said that, because it's so important that we don't forget about communication and transparent discussions. Now, in this case, with the public about risks and mitigation strategies, that would have built trust and accountability, but we still need to do that in all industries. We need to be forthcoming with what we're up against, and that way we work together as a team. So to your point, if I don't tell my staff that I have this huge report I'm working on, and who it's going to, and the fact that it's going to be taking a bit of my attention, they don't understand why maybe I came in and went right to my office versus going and saying, hey, good morning, and maybe sipping on the coffee with my employees like I usually do. So you have to communicate that stuff.
Exactly. Accountability is key. When decisions lead to loss of life, leaders must own their mistakes and take action to ensure it never happens again. And I hope cities all over the world will look at this situation and give it some thought.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, let's talk about the broader implications. This attack also shines a light on how terrorist attacks challenge leadership at every level. And terrorist attacks aren't new. They're not going away. We're going to see more of it. We've had a wide open border for the last 4 years. So we need to, every city, every county needs to have a plan in place to deal with this. And it's a reminder that security measures can never be taken lightly.
No, it's very true. It's broader than barriers. We got to have a culture of preparedness. And unfortunately, as I said earlier, the rules have changed. Terrorism was unthinkable before, but now in every faction of life, and you mentioned this open border, and Kristin, I hope that I'm wrong, but this will be in posterity, this podcast. But I'm concerned about the inauguration. I think that would be a perfect time for a terrorist to attempt to, upset the government, the transfer of power. So it's just a thought from, I used to get all of the briefings, and it's something that entered my mind. And we have to have a whole culture of preparedness. And I do love the saying, if you see something, say something.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. On that topic, I've had numerous invites. I know a lot of people that are going, and I've been invited a number of times. And I don't want to say I have zero interest, but my concerns outweigh the interest in me attending. Right. So, I do have to remind myself, and I do regularly, that there are some security concerns there, at least coming from me. Everyone I know that's going, they seem to feel really good about it. But I'm nervous, and so I'm not going. But you're spot on with that. Other cities have faced similar challenges. Let's think of times when public safety was compromised due to leadership oversight. We've seen that in the news time and time again, and there's a lot we don't see in the news. But the key takeaway is going to be learning from these mistakes and implementing change. And I don't think we see that enough.
Yeah, I was holding my breath a little bit for New York City. We know the subways are challenging, as we've already talked about. But every New Year's, and by the way, since I entered law enforcement, I'm always on edge during times like New Year's, 4th of July, those kind of things. Excuse me.
Yeah.
So there is a cascading or ripple effect when something like this happens. Think about it. Terror is the word used, and boy, is it true. But in addition to the terror that's experienced, is you lose money, there's time, effort, and you have to go into planning, and then there's people hurt, which is even more important. So this is a disaster. It really is. It's a catastrophe.
I think about you talk about the monetary aspects of it, and I should have pulled this up, but think about, I'd like to know how much they make just with Cinco de Mayo. Or I'm sorry. What is it?
Mardi Gras.
Yeah. Mardi Gras alone, they make a ton of money off of, folks traveling there for the event and for the tourism. So there are going to be people like myself that when they go to book their trip, they're going to think again and be like, I don't know. I don't know if I feel safe doing that. And, New Orleans is a city that thrives on tourism. I mean, like I was just talking about Mardi Gras, they have the Jazz Fest, and incidents like this, they shake up public confidence, and they could absolutely deter visitors for years to come. I mean, gosh, it could be, can you think of an incident where people are still a little apprehensive to go to a city due to the incident, like 9/11 maybe?
Yeah, but I think the subway attacks have made people very hesitant to get on subways when you see what's happening in New York, San Francisco. The immigrant that, or the migrant that set someone on fire, or the lady on fire, I mean, this stuff is...
He's an illegal immigrant. You were correct.
Bizarre. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And you've got, I've already mentioned the budget, but I just hope, once again, not to be redundant, that city officials all over, I'm sure New Orleans, listen, they're going to have a meeting and get ready for Mardi Gras, and, they'll make that very public. But I think cities around the country are going to have to pay attention to this as well.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Let's not forget the emotional impact on the city's residents. I briefly talked about that earlier, and business owners. So it's going to be a long road restoring that sense of safety and community resilience. I'm not just talking about earlier. I was talking about people that come there, come there for a tourist destination. These are folks that live there and have a business there. And I can imagine that's rocking their world as well. And maybe, who knows, maybe some folks are going to think about relocating because of this.
Yeah, it's true. Well, to our listeners, we've outlined some leadership lessons, but to just reiterate a few of those, leadership is about making tough decisions. It's about having interim plans from when you start a vision to you complete the vision. Safety, as Maslow's hierarchy, safety is always in the top part. You always have to think about the safety of your citizens, the safety of your workers, the safety of your family, whatever it is you're dealing with. And then you have to verbalize that. As we said, there needs to be a whole culture, kind of a safety mindset culture that people have. And then when you do make a mistake, you got to take ownership. And then you got to do that gap analysis we talked about last week, find out where the gaps are, and you got to seal the cracks.
Yeah.
And take care of those poor victims.
Yes, and their families. You're spot on. And for everyone listening, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Like, what measures would you like to see taken in your city, your county, your state to prevent such tragedies? Let's keep this conversation going. That's that accountability piece.
Absolutely. All right, everybody, we appreciate you joining us today. Don't forget to like, subscribe, rate the podcast, tell somebody about the podcast. All of that helps us. We want to go into 2025 with real force behind this podcast.
Absolutely. All right. Remember, leadership is messy, but it's worth it. Stay safe, and we'll see you next time.
Be the leader you're meant to be.
See you next week.
The Dirty Side of Leadership podcast is brought to you by Forward Operations. If you'd like to book Ron or Kristin for speaking events, training, or executive coaching, visit forwardoperations.com. Be the leader you're meant to be.